Greetings, my dear students. Now, we already started our session by at least coming up with a definition of what philosophy is. And the Aristotelian Thomistic definition that philosophy is the knowledge of all things, for their ultimate causes acquired through the use of reason, reveals to us its material object, its formal object, and its natural scope. Now, we proceed with the claim that philosophy is actually the mother discipline. So what do we mean by philosophy as the mother discipline? It has to be asked first, what makes philosophy unique from the other disciplines? Now, if we go back to history, and during the ancient times in Greek Ionia, now before the emergence of philosophy as a distinct discipline, now thinkers and people before are already investigating the nature of things, the essences of what they see, of what of the objects that spark their curiosity and wonder, and they label it as physis, physics, or nature. So before, there was no distinction between science, philosophy, and religion, which means that people are actually doing one thing, basically one thing. So when they do, when they investigate the nature of things, or the essences of the objects that spark their curiosity, then you won't be hearing them telling this is science, this is philosophy, this is religion. No, rather they are investigating things, okay, the nature of things particularly, in general, and that falls under what we call physis. Now, according to Warner, philosophy actually emerged as something revolutionary. Now, since their mythological explanation about the nature of the universe would be set aside in favor of a more coherent and rational one. How is this? If you look at the practices of the early Greeks, most specifically in ancient Greek Ionia, they were investigating things using mythology as their framework or as their paradigm to understand why such thing exists. That is why you would see and read the Iliad and Odyssey, the Homeric epics, the Armageddon of Aeschylus from the Greek tradition. You would be at least seeing in them that they explain why things happen because of the movements and the activities of gods and goddesses. So basically, before philosophy, we call it pre-philosophy, the Greeks were using mythology to explain the causes and nature of beings. So it is something that is sacred because, for example, if you want to understand why the movement of tides and waves in the ocean are destructive in a particular community, people would eventually explain those using mythology. So basically, everything was based on myths, okay, on gods and goddesses. However, there came a man. He is actually Thales of Miletus, and we can call him as the father of Western philosophy. Why? Now, around 650 BC, a man from a fishing village in Miletus named Thales, started actually to diverge and to deviate from the mythological tradition. And this is something revolutionary because Thales was acting against the tradition of explaining things and the nature of things using the mythological paradigm. So Thales was in a way asking questions like, what is the underlying substance that reality is made of? Saan gawa ang realidad? How do things come to be? Paano nagkakaroon ng ganito? Ng isang palaka, ng isang tubig, ng isang halaman? At paano nagbabago ang forma nito? At sa pagbabagong ito, ano yung nawawala? At paano ito nawawala? These are the questions of Thales. They may sound basic to you, but actually these questions are revolutionary. They are revolutionary in a sense that they were diverging and deviating from the mythological tradition. So, Thales was also asking, is there something that remains amidst all these changes? Meron bang nananatili sa lahat ng pagbabago? Now, Thales was so engrossed on coming up with an explanation as to how things came to be, or as to how things come to be. And, his basic answer is that for him, the underlying substance is water. He explained that it is not the gods and the goddesses. It is not actually Zeus. It's not Hades. It's not Athena. It's not Aphrodite. It is basically water. So the Greeks were very much concerned with the ultimate substance, and the Germans and they call it as the Urstoff. Now the Urstoff is the ultimate substance that makes up the universe, or that the ultimate or the primordial substance of which things are, or of all things share that kind of element, and it is the very reason of every being. Now, for Thales, it's water. Why water? Because he actually observed that for him it is water because sometime he observed a place, and then there were no plants at all. And then suddenly, after some time, he came back to that specific and same spot, and then he saw flowers, he saw water, and he saw frogs and other beings, and he wondered what sustains this kind of ecosystem. And then he thought of water, because water can be changed into what? Into a solid state through the process of what? Through the process of solidification. Now, water can be turned into gas. He observed that, and that is where the concept of evaporation actually came. And from gas, water can be turned into gas, and that gas, as water as well, can be turned again into its liquid form, and that is from the process of precipitation. And then precipitation, condensation, evaporation, and the cycle actually begins. It's very simple. You might be wondering, Sir, hindi naman yata tama na si Thales sabi niya ang lahat, ang bumubuo ng realidad ay tubig. But 1,000 years, okay, let us at least move 1,000 years from the time of Thales of Miletus. let's move past forward 1,000 years. This will this will be actually the gift of Thales. That science, that empirical science would affirm that our bodies are actually made up of more water than any other element, and that it is basically what composed the human body, water. Now, given the simplistic answer of Thales, I would want you to answer this question: what is then the contribution and significance of his thought? You might be thinking, sir, this is so simple, and why Thales became the father of Western philosophy? That's the point. How? Okay, how does this discovery and assertion of Thales, okay, actually a contribution on the development of human thought? Now, one thing that may help you answer that is that for the first time, I won't say absolutely it's the first time, but in the tradition of the Greeks, perhaps man has dared to go against the tradition, and that is explaining things from the mythological background, and assume that it's within man's rational ability to abstract and explain reality without giving recourse to mythological explanations. And from this point of view, it can be assumed that there must be an order in the universe, and that the universe must be an orderly system known as cosmos. Now let's move with the problem of the question from the problem of the question that we actually posed as our preliminary activity of during the first session. Now, what makes a question or a problem philosophical? Now, according to Isaiah Berlin, there are three characteristics of a philosophic question or problem. Number one, the question or a problem is very broad and general, which means we call them fundamental. Like, what is life? Why is there something rather than nothing? What is justice? What is beauty? What is art? Second, there is no single methodology for answering these questions. Now, for example, the question, what is art? There is no specific way for us to say, okay, this is the only way that we can say that it is an art. Why? Okay, imagine this. For you, a specific music is beautiful, but when you try to invite others to listen to that music, you might accept, you might receive comments that are contrary to your belief. For example, hindi naman maganda yan. Ano maganda dyan? So it is actually a problem now. So what is art? But in philosophy, we insist that there is actually no single methodology for answering these questions. This is what differentiates philosophy from the modern empirical science. What I'm talking about modern empirical science is that this is the science that emerged during the at least the 17th, 18th, 19th century. Specifically from the Novum Organon of Francis Bacon. So there's no single methodology on this. So for example, what is knowledge? What do you mean by knowledge? What do you mean by, for example, what is truth? How do we answer the question, what is truth? So philosophy would say that there is no single way for answering these questions. Number three, these questions seem to have no practical utility. You might be asking, so why ask what is justice? So can justice feed me? So what? It seems that they have no practical utility. So these three characteristics are actually a general trait or characteristics of a philosophical question or a problem. First, it is fundamental. Second, that there is no single methodology. And third, it seems that they have no practical utility. Now, question, is it possible for a discipline? When I talk about discipline, I'm referring to systematic bodies of knowledge that includes chemistry, physics, religion, theology, sociology, political science, and other disciplines. So is it possible for a discipline to flourish without philosophy? Our answer is that, well, without philosophy, the different sciences would not have emerged. So this presupposes that every science, every discipline have their philosophical foundation or framework from which they inherited or at least adopted. Now, it became actually that, you see, the article did not actually give definitions as to what philosophy is, and instead give you many ways on how to understand philosophy and how to define it. But it has become the task of philosophers to ask many general questions that led towards the development of a particular science. For example, from asking the question, what is life? That is a philosophical question, right? What is life? But that particular question led us to the development of a particular science, that is biology. And that is why biology, as a science that deals with life and other life forms, inherited the question of what is life from philosophy. That is why, have you ever wondered who is the father of biology? Aristotle. But even before he became the father of biology, Aristotle was first and foremost a philosopher. And the question, what is life, actually gave birth to a particular science. Or, for example, what are the laws of nature? What are the things that we can derive from our observation of nature? This is a philosophical question in natural philosophy, and it led towards the development of physics. That's why before, Newton did not actually, they were not actually using physics, but rather they were more on actually using natural philosophy. That's why they call it natural philosophy, until such time that it became more distinct and it deviated from philosophy as the mother discipline, and it became physics that we know today. Okay, it is in the discipline of philosophy where the framework of the sciences have been subjected to constant criticisms and questioning, which in turn led to the refinement of their methodology. The task of philosophy here now is to always question the methodology of these sciences. And in return, we have seen that the criticism of philosophers, that they posed and they at least that they have thrown to these sciences, led to the refinement of their methodology. That even the scientific method that you know was actually born out of philosophical scrutiny and criticism that led for the scientists to come up with, instead of certainty, we have more about probability. Before, science was engrossed with what can we know, and they say what can only be known is the thing that is posited before us, or the positive that is given before us through empirical verification. How do I know that this is a marker? Because I can touch it, because I can see it, I can verify it with my common sense. Now, the presupposition of or the science before was engrossed with, how do I know that that this highlighter is really a thing, an object that I really know, and how certain I am. Before their concern was on certainty, but now because of the constant criticisms of philosophers, science moved away from certainty to probability. That's why you don't have 100%. They always say, okay, this alcohol can remove 99.99%, because there is always a probability that it might not be correct, or it might not be true after all. Now, what makes a philosopher different from a scientist? First is, now a physicist will follow the method of his science while doing his experiment in laboratory, right? You will do step by step, okay? Step 1, step 2, and you will follow the scientific methodology, the scientific method. Second, a physicist or a scientist does not question the methodology he uses. Rather, he applies the methodology, and he has to come up with descriptive and explanatory questions upon using this methodology. So I apply what is required of me, and then I have to come up explaining the results of my experiment. So that is what a scientist does. Therefore, the physicist is doing what we call a first order inquiry. Okay? You have to remember that. A scientist is doing a first order inquiry by following the methodology without questioning its methodology, and he should arrive at an explanation using that methodology. However, a philosopher would take it upon himself to actually question or criticize the assumptions of the scientist in doing his science and experiments. That is, if the physicist would not question his methodology, the philosopher is actually looking behind that physicist. Wait, is your methodology correct? Is the assumption of your methodology correct? Is your hypothesis correct? So, the philosopher now is the one questioning and criticizing the methodology that a scientist is using. Therefore, like question, what is your justification for assuming that there are causes and effects in nature? And we actually understand the world from the point of view of cause-effect analysis, the law of causality, the knowledge of the law of causality, that we see yellow because of light entering into our retina, and then pupil will dilate, and then we'll process it, and then we'll see yellow. And any change of color will depend on the amount of light that enters into our eyes, the cause and effect. Or I know that this trying to pinch my skin for a long period of time with so much pressure and force would allow me to realize that it's painful. So the cause is this, and the effect is the painful or the tingling effect. So that's our knowledge of the law of causality in nature. But the philosopher would ask the assumption, the validity of that assumption. How do you know that there is really causality? Or are you just trying to imagine that there is really a connection between pinching your skin and the pain that you feel upon pinching it? Or the philosopher is there to criticize and scrutinize the methods of the sciences and question their assumption. Therefore, the philosopher keeps the scientist on his toes for scrutiny. So, the scientist cannot easily get away with philosopher. That's why we have the philosophy of science, because philosophy will the task of the philosopher of science is now to ask the assumptions and methodology of the sciences, be it hard science, or the earth sciences, or the social sciences. So now, philosophy therefore is considered as a meta-discipline, which means it is a discipline, but it is a meta-discipline because as you have said, I remember your recitations. You were talking that philosophy covers a broad range of topic. That philosophy can at least from the point of view of biology, physics, research, chemistry, there are philosophy in it. The philosophy can transcend and cross over different areas and discipline. That is why I am a student of philosophy, and what I do is that I am not only confined to philosophy per se, but rather I am doing philosophy of art, so philosophy of music. I also do philosophy of language. I also do philosophical anthropology, political philosophy. So the a philosopher has many things to do and to has many tasks, okay, to actually respond to, because it is a discipline that can cross over different areas and discipline. That is why, remember, if what the physicist is doing is what we call first order inquiry, what philosophers are doing are what we call second order inquiry. Therefore, we can say that philosophy now is the self-awareness of the sciences and the source from which all the sciences draw their worldview and methodological principles. So this is very bold, actually, a bold claim that even though scientists would deny that there are no philosophies in what they do, that they are not doing philosophy, they're doing science, I don't think so, because beneath the methodology or beneath the things that they do is actually the question of philosophy. The philosophy trying to push these scientific methodologies to new frontiers, to actually question them. That is why, as the last remark for this session, is that philosophy is vision. So Friedrich Weissman said that philosophy is vision. Now I would want you to ponder on this. Why do you think philosophy is vision? Now, from session number 1 up to the session, we can say that philosophy 1, ancient in its most ancient meaning, it is the love of wisdom, and it is aiming at wisdom, and it is knowledge sought after its own sake and not for any other purpose. Second, that philosophy, okay, is the knowledge of all things, for their ultimate causes acquired through the use of reason. And we also discussed that philosophy is actually the mother discipline, because philosophy becomes the self-awareness of the sciences, because the scientists are doing first order inquiry, and the philosopher's task is to always keep the physicists, the scientists, the chemists, the biologists, and other scientists to his vision of scrutinizing the methodologies they have. Thus, we are now leading up to a claim that philosophy is vision. Now, why do you think philosophy is vision? So it's up to you on how you will answer this question, but of course expect that this will be part of your assessment as to why philosophy is vision. That's why in philosophy, sabihin natin, huwag mahihiyang magtanong kung bakit at mayroon nito. Okay, so I think that's all, and if you have questions in mind, then please email me at kjgvillesca@1-bosco.org. So happy viewing, and I hope you learned something from this session.